So imagine my wife and I walk into my mother's house, and she's passed away on the living room floor. And over the course of the next few months, I'm unpacking the reality of her death and what that means for my life. And one of the things that comes to mind is that, she passed away from complications with diabetes and some heart issues that she had. And I start wrestling with this reality that, man, this is an issue on both sides of my family going back hundreds of years. And I have to break this cycle. But I don't enjoy fitness, and I enjoy eating all the wrong foods. So I'm having a conversation with a dear friend of mine, Jeff, about this issue, and his response then is to invite me into deeper relationship, right into his life, to start working out, because that's something that is a strength for him and he does regularly. So we start working out, and I had this realization as we're working out at this gym in the community that sweat's pouring from my face, I'm in pain, and I'm like, I'm breaking these chains. And I'm gonna be able to teach my kids to do the same. And so it's just one of the many benefits of our friendship. Another that comes to mind is at that same rec center, there are kids running around that rec center, and at the time, those that we were playing basketball with were all young black boys and young black men, some gang affiliated, and many of them coming from single parent homes, dealing with challenges. And I was humbled by the fact that they all knew Jeff by name, that he was mentoring a number of them, deep, intimate mentorship relationships, and that he had adopted one of these kids that essentially is his son. And I said, man, Jeff is worthy of my respect, and I really want to be in friendship with guys like this, but in light of all the things that are going on, Jeff is living out the solution. And he's not doing it for any other reason, that's just who he is. He cares about the things that he should care about, and those are just some of the features of our friendship. And so welcome to part 2 of our series, Living in the Solution. Today we're going to talk about the benefits of our friendship, and in light of that being the solution for some of the racial unrest in our country. We're going to talk about why you should care, why we care, and then we're going to end with just some practical action steps on the heels of folks in both our circles that are just wondering and asking questions like, man, what do I do? I care. How do I express that care?
And for me, before my relationship with Dale, I always wanted to grow in my faith and my ability to really connect more deeply in the Word. And it was just something that, man, I tried over and over again, trying to give me all these different little tricks to be able to do it, to spend time in the Word, to spend time in prayer, and it just was not happening alone. It wasn't happening by myself. But man, through the relationship that Dale and I have, and so that's an area of strength for him, and being in the gym is not as important of a strength than the spiritual and faith side of his strengths. And so for me, that's been awesome for him to model that for me, to keep me accountable, to support me in this. And so through that, man, I've enriched my faith and grown in that area. And another thing that I really, really love and respect about Dale is his ability to lead his family really, really well. Man, he is a phenomenal father and a phenomenal husband, and the fruit of that is so evident when you meet his kids and you meet his wife and see how much he loves them and that they love him. And so that's something that he gets to model for me, and I get to grow and be shaped by him and by that example that he sets. We want to talk about the why I care, why Dale cares, and why we believe that you should care about this. I'm deeply relational, and so I love being around people. I love seeing people flourish. And when I got people that I love who are not flourishing, and that they're being held back by these systems that are in place and by these injustices, and I want to see them win and flourish, and that's why I care.
I think for me, Jeff, I care deeply. And I think I'm learning in light of this circumstance that I don't have to teach my kids to deal with systemic racial issues for their entire life. I've been teaching them that. We were in Dillard's a couple of weeks ago, and a woman was following us, so intentionally following us around the store that it looked like almost like a comedy skit. Her head was popping up over the clothing things, and I stopped my kids and I pointed out and I said, man, this is something that you're going to have to deal with. So I'm pointing it out so that we can be prepared and understand how to respond. Not get a bad attitude about it, but just understand the reality. And now that I am looking at the response from the community, and not just the black community, but my white brothers and sisters who are standing up in record numbers, I care more deeply because so many other people care now. And when I look at the American flag, which I've always been very, very proud of, and I think about lyrics to songs, or I look at movies, but in particular, that song, God Bless America, which I think causes a lot of people to respond and feel a lot of emotion. You know, I think about those lyrics. I'm proud to be an American where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. Because there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I look at the flag. There's one right outside the window where we're shooting this video. And I'm reminded that, man, there's a new America that my kids, that I may be able to live in a land where I don't have to tell my kids that it is going to be a normal part of their existence to be treated that way. And so that's one of the reasons why I care. So the third and final step of this particular video is to provide some practical action steps. Jeff and I both have had a number of texts and emails and communication from our friends who are white, who are like, hey, what do I do? I care, but how do I respond? What are some constructive and helpful ways to respond? And so in response to that, or in addition to that, I'll say that I've also talked to a number of people in the black community that are wondering the same thing. And this is a response to that. This is just some practical action steps. You'll see there are resources connected with this video, but we wanted to share a few in light of this video.
Picture this being in Central Park, being a black man as a bird watcher, been there for years. This white lady comes by with her dog, and then the black man asks her politely, hey, can you put your dog on a leash? Because that's the law of the park. The lady then freaks out, is in fear, calls the police, literally says, I'm in fear of my life. I'm being threatened by a black man. And then, the black man's recording this because he's now become afraid because he's worried about what the police are going to do. And I think it's human nature to be afraid of what you do not know. Right? So if you think about, and you're afraid of the dark because you don't know what's there, you're afraid of what's under the bed. Right? You're afraid of being vulnerable because you don't know what people are going to think. And that lady was afraid of that black man because she doesn't have a relationship with him, because she doesn't know him. What you need to do is to build a relationship, to lose that fear, to then start making that real change. So Dale, there's a question that I get quite a bit, is this idea of, all right, who carries the burden on this? Of this educating and learning, especially for white people to be able to learn and grow in this area. And I want to ask you: is this on the shoulders of us to be able to say, hey, I need to learn and educate myself before I enter into this conversation, or do you feel like there's a better way to do it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I hear that regularly from the black community, often to the white community. It's not our responsibility to educate you, and I understand the sentiment. I don't agree. I think it's both, and I think that we are in this together, this battle and this fight for equality, just for loving and treating people based on who they are, not their skin color. And so understanding the underlying tide of injustice and the history of that in our country, to really get a good understanding of that, it does require some self-reflection and some reading and some study and some understanding. But I think the more important component of that is having friendships where you can have that dialogue with black men and women. And you may say, well, there's not a friendship there. My pastor of my old church had a conversation with me, and it was so overwhelming to him to understand that there was still racial issues going on, and he didn't understand that the very next day he went to a body shop appointment for his car. It was a black serviceman who was on the drive inspecting vehicles for the body shop work, and he was just compelled to ask him, what's your experience being a black man in America? And as the gentleman proceeded to answer the question, he had tears in his eyes. He felt value and a sense of importance, the fact that my previous pastor who happened to be white asked him the question and cared. And so there wasn't a relationship there, but there was humility and a desire to learn. So I think it's both and I think it's an excellent question, because I think that's what it's going to take to continue to move the ball forward.
So it sounds like, and the first step is really to educate, and it can start with me, it can start with our white brothers and sisters, but you're saying we need both of us. We need to be able to do this together.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the second step is intentionality. And so that is humbly pursuing and being a part of the black community. So there's a lot of cool ways to be able to do that. Some of the stuff can be attending a black church, going to a poetry slam downtown, watching black films, seeking out black-owned businesses. And I think for some it could feel uncomfortable because maybe it's a new experience. But whenever I get into an uncomfortable spot because of my race, and I think about Dale and how he was sharing with me that's a pretty normal daily thing for him. A lot of times where he is the only black man in the room. And so I think that's where you can grow, is when you step into a different environment and get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I think another thing is just friendliness. I was sharing with Jeff that I am a part of the broader cycling community, and I was on a bike ride recently, and I had an experience that I've never had before, where we're cycling, and I stop at a rest stop, and a white couple comes over and strikes up this conversation with just tons of enthusiasm, and it was clear that, at least I'm making an assumption, that it was in light of all the things that are going on, and it was their way of saying, man, I'm not a part of this craziness. I'm not on the wrong side of this. I'm on the right side. And so I'm going to express friendliness to this stranger who happens to be black that I don't know. And it motivated me to say, wow, like, people are in this. This is not something that the black community is bearing on their own, and it's changing the way that we're interacting. And we had this great conversation, exchanged numbers, talked about bike rides. And so friendliness, I think, on both sides, not only for the white community, but for the black community as well. I think there are many who at times, especially when something like this happens, we operate at times with these underlying narratives, at least I've heard them, that are like, well, you can be cool with white people, you can even have white friends, but at the end of the day, underlying, you cannot trust somebody who's white. They're just not going to be there for you, or they're going to fail you in some way. And I know that that's not a true statement, because I have experienced authentic, life-giving friendships with people who happen to be white. No different than my black friendships, in the fact that they're life-giving and extremely valuable. And so that is not a true statement. But for those that struggle with that, I think one of the entry-level steps is, man, just being friendly to people who are white, especially when they are first to the table at a smile or a hello. And in light of that story today, I think about that as a practical step. Another one is, again, the whole theme of this video is relationship. And so from my vantage point, I think entering into friendships with people that are cross-cultural, and I think about the benefit that I have gleaned from my black relationships, and people would say, well, of course, I mean, you're black, they're black. There's shared experience, there's shared understanding. But the same thing holds true in a different way with my white friends. In some cases, it's the same. So Jeff and I have conversations about shoes. We can talk about Jordans. He's got a nice collection. We have conversations about music. We like some of the same music. I have other friends that like country music. Believe it or not, I have actually flirted with the idea of listening to some country. That's funny. But real talk, friends, cross-cultural friendships can be life-giving. And it extends beyond just myself. My kids see Jeff like an uncle. When I say we're going to somebody's house, they get pretty excited. But when I say we're going to Jeff's house, they get over the top excited and thrilled. They're not operating with any of those false narratives that sometimes in my community we operate with. They see him as a family member, and my family benefits from our friendship as well. So the final step in practical application is what we call sacrifice. that is a point at which we actually start to give of ourselves. And I think before we can do that on either side of this issue, whether you're in the black community or whether you're in the white community, I truly believe it starts with being honest. We have to be honest with the biases that are in our heart. There are some who are in a position where they're like, man, I don't really care. Or I don't see the issue here. I don't understand or see racism. And so part of our challenge to those is to say, examine the issue within self first. Be honest with what's going on and then get answers there. We think that that's really important. And again, I mentioned that on both sides. I think it's really important on the black side of the table as well to be honest with those biases. I was fortunate in that I did not grow up in an environment where I was taught those things, but many are, both black and white. But I did not grow up that way. I'm fortunate and I'm blessed. But even despite that, I've had to examine my heart at times and say, man, do I think that I can't trust white people? Or is there some inherent risk in entering into friendship? Or are they going to understand my plight or my life or care about me less than somebody who's black? I've had to wrestle through those things. And so we're encouraging you to wrestle through those things as you start to take these action steps and seek out the highest solution of this issue, which is relationship.
I think a really good way to do that is examining how you are using your time, your talent, and your treasure. So be thinking about that. The same thing that Dale's talking about, take an honest inward look and see how you are using those three things, your time, your talent, and your treasure. So is any of your time spent towards this issue? And just be thinking through that. Is that taking up any of my time? Next one is talent. Am I using any of my skills to help my black brothers and sisters? You know, if you've got professional skills in a certain area, are you able to bring other people along in that industry to help and champion them to be able to be promoted and to win? And then the last one is treasure, man. Are you putting your money where your mouth is? Are you supporting organizations that are doing this work? And so, I mean, we get to work for an awesome organization that's called CrossPurpose that does this work. And so there's other ones in the city that do some great work. And so we can be able to share those resources with you as well. But be examining how you're using your time, your talent, and your treasure as it relates to this movement.
Well, we hope that you found this video helpful. The change is happening, and we just encourage you and hope that you're going to join us because it's a fun ride.